Any other? Oh, sorry, Jacob, please.
No, that's fine. It was the second question. Earlier, we were talking about Badiou's use of materialism, which is now termed material dialectics.
A materialist dialectic.
A materialist dialectic. And in addition to the sort of terms that are object and subject, there's also this interplay of truth. Where does that come into the sort of interpretation of radical subjectivity being able to be either counter-revolutionary or revolutionary?
Okay, so here's the thing about subjects. For Badiou and the notion of truth, a subject is whatever thing produces a truth effect. Now, this is probably even more obscure than it was before, but for example, it is the subject that makes the radical exception. I'll just use the historical example I'm familiar with, which is Lenin, right? Lenin is a communist. The Tsar is overthrown in the February Revolution, and you have the Kerensky government. Lenin comes and says, hey, this Kerensky government sucks. It's continuing the war, this imperialist war, and we need to overthrow it. Well, if you take a look at the objective forces, Lenin doesn't have enough objective forces. The Bolsheviks don't have enough objective forces. If you compare the objective forces, the Bolsheviks lose. And so they try to seize the government, and what happens? They lose. This is the July days, right? As a matter of fact, there was no revolutionary subject at that point. There was no truth of that effect. There was no exception for the Bolsheviks. There was just language and bodies, the language of Russian imperialism and the bodies of the arrangement of the provisional government and its imperialist army. So Lenin flees, and through a wide course of events, the government begins to trust the Bolsheviks, or depends on the Bolsheviks. It doesn't trust them. And Lenin manages to sneak back into the country from Finland. And this is in October. Well, it might be late September. They had a different calendar, so dates are always a mess. And Lenin argues again. Now is the time to seize the state. And Zinoviev, who was, a very high party official, and later was still a high party official until he was purged as part of the Trotskyist left opposition, says, what are you talking about? We don't have the objective forces to overthrow the provisional government. We have less forces now than we did in July. And right? And so Zinoviev was objectively weighing the forces. And as a matter of fact, the Bolsheviks didn't have enough, objectively speaking. But Lenin pushed the issue. He said, no, what we need is, we are the revolutionary party, which means we need to engage in revolution. This is the time to seize the state. So what happens is this party, that is a relatively small party of theoretically very advanced people who are, quite skilled, but there's nothing particularly special about the Bolsheviks. But what happens is the very assertion of this exception, of this truth, that yes, we can seize the provisional government, creates a new subjectivity. It creates the Bolsheviks not as one of many socialist Russian parties, but the Bolsheviks as the revolutionary party itself. And so this subjectivity produces a truth. It produces an exception. And this exception is that it overthrows a more powerful government. It seizes the winter power, all power to the Soviets, the Kerensky government is disintegrated. And then the party forms with the state, and we have another truth effect. How does a weak communist group with no international support defend itself? It's the same problem with the Paris Commune. And the answer is, objectively, it can't. So what happens? You have the formation of a new truth, which is, no, a revolutionary army can stand against everything. And so you have Lenin and the Bolsheviks, and now the Communist Party of Russia, form a new subjectivity, that of the Red Army. And they begin subjective interventions into battles in order to win them. Battles that they, on any objective conditions, should not have won. And so, once again, you have a revolutionary subjectivity that becomes this radical exception to the way things are. And so, this is how the subjective ties into the truth effect. right? It's a generation of radical subjectivity. Now, here's the thing, Baidu is a materialist. So guess what? Sometimes you can try that and you get killed. You stake yourself on what you believe is a subject and it is not. And you die for it. Or if you don't die, you go down with it politically. People who stake their politics on the French Communist Party, that's not a subject. The Spartacists in Germany who stake themselves on Rosa Luxemburg and those left communists, nope, that was not it. And so, I mean, this is another aspect of dialectical materialism we need to be aware of, which is it's materialism. There is no foregone conclusion. There is no guarantee of us, not structurally and not historically. The only guarantee that the structure gives us is that there will be revolts. It never tells us that they will overthrow it completely. And it is up to us to create this revolutionary subjectivity. So does that tie the objective, subjective, and truth in relatively clear?
It's not incredibly clear, but I'm sure further research on my part will elaborate that. I wanted to ask one question about counter-revolutionaries as a subject, and the Spartacist rebellion in Germany, and how, for instance, Walter Benjamin has this sort of theory that, you know, if all you need to do is, you know, in the case of the Nazis, right, the Nazis existed as a failed revolution, a socialist revolution. Does that tie into the sort of subjectivity of the anti-revolutionary? Would you consider the slaying of the Spartacists to be objective or subjective?
Well, I mean, the slaying of the Spartacists in and of itself was an objective fact.
Right, you've already said that.
Yeah, they didn't have an own. But here's the thing, is what arises from that is an even more counter-revolutionary and reactionary subjectivity, i.e. the Nazi Party. And the Nazi Party is not just the objective functioning of capitalism, it's a subjective counter-revolutionary force in the world. So even though their failure didn't... Walter Benjamin has a really clever phrase. And it's mostly right, which is behind every fascism there's a failed revolution. Okay, that's really clever and it's pretty predictive and pretty good. But there's no essentiality to it, right? All those fascisms need to be examined in their actual historical creation. And in this case, the failure of the Spartacists did lead to a fascistic subject. But, so yes, I agree with that. But it wasn't essential. Does that answer, clarify?
So what you're saying is the Spartacists themselves were not an event that created the truth of that radical subjectivity.
Yeah, they were not a truth. They did not create a truth.
Okay.
And the radical exception of Nazism engenders, again, a revolution to it. The truth generated isn't that, hey, I can kill a lot of people, right, which is what the Nazis wanted to do. It was a fake. The truth only emerges from the Nazis as a resistance to it. And the truth of the Nazis is there is evil in the world and we should stand against it. Not that, you know, National Socialism is valuable in any way.
So, in a sense, then, when you become trapped up in the objective conditions, you're not generating truth. Only subjective forces can generate truth out of a proper analysis of the objective conditions. Is that sort of where it goes?
Yeah.
So, but also, how much does the objective forces play into the subjective forces? Like, how much?
Well, I mean,
does the question make sense to you?
Yeah, what you're saying is, to what extent do the objective forces condition our ability to engage in subjective interventions? And the answer is a lot. A lot. But I mean, this is the very nature of dialectical materialism. The objective, what we can't do is engage in coarse Marxism. And coarse Marxism and coarse materialism, vulgar materialism, says, oh, once we reach X level of union members with Y number of guns, that's when we have a revolution. And you're not saying that. Yes, the objective conditions will always condition what we do. But also, we too have an effect on those objective conditions.